Welcome to Capes, Cows and Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. And welcome to our weekly spoiler review show of the latest entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Today we're going to be looking at the second episode of the show, titled The Star-Spangled Man. And this one is directed by series director Kari Skogland and written by Michael Castelline. I'm your host, Jake Hart. I'm a podcaster and a writer for Fresh Take Hub, and I'm joined today by our special guest, writer and film journalist, Stefanos Florakis. How you doing, Stefanos?
Oh, good.
Fantastic. How are you feeling about this week then? Did you enjoy the episode and stuff?
I did. I found it to be... I did have some issues with it, but there was some stuff that I really loved about it. Some stuff that I really did not expect from this episode, or generally from Marvel, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I think I have a little issue about the whole show as a general, but I'll get into that in a bit. But I think this episode keeps on delivering of what was promised to us, I think, from like the trailers and stuff. Like, we finally get the lead characters together this week for some action and some really good comedy. I mean, this episode almost feels like a couple's therapy session as well. And I feel as if this show, the success of the show is really going to hinge on the buddy cop chemistry between Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan. And I think from this introduction of both of them getting together, I think it's pretty strong so far. You know, like, you have a really good balance between Anthony Mackie's charisma and sort of heroism compared to like Sebastian Stan's sort of world-weary cynicism. So I think there's a really good balance there, and neither of them sort of outshine the other, I think. And I also love the balance that 1 minute you can have this great action scene, and then the next minute you have this really intimate close-up character studies, really fleshing out and exploring the psychology within all these characters. So I really like that aspect of it, but I feel as if this episode, a lot of it feels like a setup episode, because we're just sort of introducing all the major players for this story without actually progressing the story, if you know what I mean. But there's some also really good, interesting thematic elements in this episode, which I think are starting to take place for the whole season. You know, particularly I think the concept of heroism, you know, and how it's perceived by all the people and the heroes that need to save them. So I think all of that is great. The only sort of slight issue I have with maybe the show itself, I feel as if both these episodes that we've seen are like parts 1 and 2 of a bigger film rather than episodic television, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I get you. That's basically the kind of issue I've been having so far. It actually reminds me a lot of some of the mistakes the Marvel Netflix shows were doing, because they also did the same, very similar thing, especially with the Defenders, where the first episode would just introduce the characters but wouldn't even meet them, and then the second episode it will be the moment where they started meeting up with each other. And even though it does make sense in the matter of a narrative you try to build, but the thing is, this is just 6 episodes, and to be honest, I think each minute is very vital, because it is not a 10 episode run, it's not 13 episodes like the Netflix shows. And yes, to be fair, maybe we should see this as a 6-hour film, which, if that's the case, it kind of makes sense why those 2 episodes feel like a setup or a part of the first act. Which the problem is, I'm still not 100% engaged, or at least I'm not ready yet to wake up early in the morning to catch the episode, because I have not given enough to anticipate what will happen next.
Yeah, totally agree. I don't get the sense of excitement that I got from WandaVision, because there was so much mystery and speculation surrounding WandaVision, while this seems a bit more straight edge. And like you said, like with 6 episodes, I feel as if you need to get straight into it. You know what I mean? You don't have a lot of time to tell this big story. And, you know, as a big fan of episodic weekly television, you know, me and Dave have talked about this numerous times on the show, how we really like the the format that Disney Plus is going back to the weekly, because it creates speculation, it creates anticipation for these shows, it creates what I love, the water cooler talk. Everyone's on the same page. But this does feel like a 6-hour film in a way, and I can't fault Marvel for that because this is their intention. It's not designed to be episodic TV in a way. It's more sort of, this is one big film in chapters. And even though I like the weekly format, I feel as if this show possibly might be better digested as like a one sitting of a 6-hour movie, if you know what I mean. Obviously, 6 hours is a long time. You can take pauses in between that. But I don't know if the weekly format is in favor of this show. What do you think, Stefanos?
I agree. I think if the whole season came out all together and you would just binge watch, I think it would have benefited more. It's something we talked before the show started about Justice League, the Snyder Cut, and the fact that it was designed to be like a limited series, and it benefits from that. I think when you watch as a limited series, it really benefits its story and its characters, and especially the pacing. And for this, even though it is designed the same way, I almost feel that it was still made to be as one, or at least there's 2 episodes. So I think they should have gone with the WandaVision approach and had released those 2 episodes in the same day, or at least maybe one day after the other, and maybe would have been a more solid experience as a premiere instead of the typical week by week episode.
Can you believe this?
I know, right? 2 weeks ago, we're prepping the team for a special ops mission in Chile, and now this.
Don't get me wrong, this has been great. It's been great, but it's been a lot of handshakes, a lot of suits, a lot of speeches and senator meetings. And I just want to do the job.
This is the job, John.
Right, so let's get into the episode breakdown itself. We start the episode with our new Captain America. So this is John Walker. He's back at his high school where he's reflecting on his past. When in walks his wife, John seems to be nervous about, going out there and becoming the new Captain America, but his wife says, nah, I think you'll be great. As she leaves, we are then introduced to his best friend, Lamar. And John also notes that his stint as Cap has been great, but it's been a lot of suits, handshakes, speeches, and senators. And Lamar reminds him that that's the job. I really like this sort of opening scene because from the reveal last week, everyone was like, whoa, that's not our Captain America. And we sort of say that he looks a bit like a goon and stuff like that. But I think this is a really good way of opening this episode because Marvel is almost trying to humanize him from the get-go. We're trying to have some sort of sympathy from him, that we're trying to make sure that he's not an asshole straight up. He's not like a Hayward, you could say. He's got some depth to him. He's got some struggles to him. And I think there is a lot of parallels here with Steve Rogers, because when Steve Rogers first became Captain America, like John says, there was a lot of suits and handshakes and speeches and going around and, not actually doing the job, not actually being a Captain America on the field of battle. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But what did you think of this little cold opening?
Kind of like what I said before, I kind of wish that was released at the same time with the previous episode. Because, like I said, when we were introduced to him at the end of the previous episode, we were feeling the same thing as Sam was feeling, the distaste and the anger of him taking the mantle. It doesn't necessarily change a lot, but it definitely humanizes him a lot more. Although I still don't know much about him, because I think another issue I have with this is we are told that he's good for it, but we don't actually see it. We definitely see the more innocent side of him, and I don't know if it's because I like White Russell, but you could definitely see some level of vulnerability. But so far, he seems a bit too passive. But again, it's really early on still, so I don't know yet what to feel about him. But it is a good scene. It's a very good way to give some multi layers to the character. But still, I don't know what if he has any motives. Because if anything else, if we've known anything about from the Winter Soldier and Civil War, nothing is really what it seems. But still, I think that's why I think the casting of Ryan Russell is really good, because he can do all this stuff. He can be the more complex character, the likable character, or even the character that you want to punch in the face.
Definitely. I mean, he's sort of bringing all of that in this episode at various points. So, it's from the very beginning. It's funny you mentioned that we're sort of told from a different perspective what this guy is, and I think this opening scene does that because, first of all, we get the Marvel logo, the animation, but instead of the famous song that we're used to, we get this different variation of the Star-Spangled Man theme from the first Captain America theme, and as I was listening to this and as he was walking out, I couldn't help but think of what you said last week of when Captain America was introduced to the world. You said there was like a bastardized version of the Captain America theme of Steve Rogers. I almost kind of felt a same version here, like the Star-Spangled Man, they were playing it, but it did feel like a weirder, more bastardized version of the theme. And, he's running out into the football pitch. He's signing autographs, so there's a marching band, everyone's wearing red, white, and blue. It's all very American, and I think it just goes to show the propaganda of America. I even noticed, Disney throwing a bit of corporate synergy by promoting ABC's Good Morning America. I was like, that's a bit sneaky, Disney. I saw what you're doing there. And then, to go on what you said of, we're being told who this guy is, we even get Sarah Hines, who runs through his impressive CV, the Medals of Honor. He's got 3 of them. Counter-terrorism expert. His body has been studied by the government. But this is all a very propaganda way of looking at him, so we still don't know who this guy is or what his motives are.
Yeah, because also a good point for mentioning all the Disney merchants outlets. Because that was the weird thing. Because I know what they're trying to do, presenting all these being the modern way of propaganda, which would be our main American hero in a football field, in a local high school, a band playing a classic tune, but also modern, and all this is just being talk show in a network television show, which all that it screams, we are America, we are great, here's a hero, we are also great. But at the same time, also Disney is promoting itself, which this is like the definition of propaganda in so many different ways. First of all, I mean, to be fair, if you have the outlets, I mean, yeah, obviously you can use them to push forward your narrative, but also at the same time, I'm like, what are you trying exactly to say? Because if you, in a way, you criticize it, you also kind of criticize yourself, which is, that is true. Well done. That is very good and very brave, and not many companies can do that. I mean, look at The Simpsons. For years, it was making fun of Fox and Fox News, and now it doesn't belong to Fox. So, but yeah, to be fair though, even though I understood all that, the one part which I was a bit iffy about in the narrative perspective, it was the interviewer saying all this exposition about him. Which, in one point, I get it. Like, if it was a normal show, they would have done that. That's the procedure they would do. They would show a montage of any footage they have. But in the narrative perspective, it did feel a bit forced. Because I see the whole picture, and then I'm thinking, well, that's not really necessary, because we kind of see him being able to fight later on. So all this footage of telling me he won 3 medals of honor, he did thus and thus in that country and that military service, and him just training, I don't think that was necessary, but I get why they did it. If I had something to change or twitch, it just don't include that, because overall you give your points in that scene and later on in the fight.
But I kind of think that that's kind of the point of the scene, is for it to feel forced, is for it to feel like this American everything is great propaganda sort of thing. It feels like it tracks like for what like a show like Good Morning America would do. And it's like, imprinting this image of him to the world within the MCU. Not for us necessarily, but for the world within the MCU.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I get why they did it and understand this functionality. I'm just saying, me as a viewer and talking in the matter of narrative. But yes, like in the world itself, it makes sense.
All right, so we then move on to how the reactions of Bucky watching this sort of press conference event thing, which is almost parallel to when we saw the announcement of him in the end of last episode. You can really see the difference between Sam and Bucky. Sam is like this. He almost feels really let down, disappointed, and like, oh, fuck, you know what I mean? While when Bucky's watching this, you can see rage in him, and he's just so angry. I don't know if he's angry at this guy, if he's angry at Sam. He's just feeling like this hatred and anger is just pouring out of him as he's watching this footage. So he's like, fuck it, I've had enough. I got to go speak to Sam. Sam's got his own matters still to deal with, though. He's on his way to Munich to look into the flag smashers, but he runs into Bucky at this military airport, which this was a bit like, huh? How did this happen? Like, I understand that Bucky's been pardoned, but he's a free citizen, you could say. How did he just walk onto a military base? Not sure about that. And the fact that there's no problem with him joining Sam on this secret top mission, I don't know. It just felt a bit like, oh, let's just get Bucky in here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Before going to that, like the thing you said before about Bucky watching the TV, it's a good parallel how the previous episode ended with Sam watching the announcement, and this starts with our other hero watching the interview. Especially his reaction when Walker said that Steve was like a brother to him, and you can literally see his face, both laughing, but in a very aggressive way, which was great. It was a very good way to continue to go to the next episode. But when we go to the Air Force Base, that also baffled me. That was a bit too fast. And especially that was the way you bring them together for the first time in the show. It seemed a bit off. Although I like the idea that Sam, when we learned the previous episode that Sam would try to get in contact with Bucky, and Bucky wouldn't answer the phone, but the only time he would get in contact with him is whenever he would be basically angry at him. Which kind of like says a lot about him. Whenever there's a point of actual healing, he's avoiding it. But when it comes to conflict, he immediately joins. But yes, but how he managed to go into the base just with ease and then join Sam in a mission just like that, not even knowing many information about it. I think that was bizarre. Like, I would get if it was someone like Steve, because they have that relation with each other, and Bucky would go anywhere with Steve. But in this case, based on what we've seen, he doesn't seem to be that loyal to Sam, especially if you're angry at him, and especially going to Munich for a mission that even himself says that he doesn't believe it. And also, I can't see why he would risk it also to leave the country when he knows that he's not allowed to do whatever he wants. At least not yet.
I completely agree with you. It just felt, considering how we were really taking our time in the last episode, the first episode, and we were all of us were sort of surprised by that. We're like, oh, they're actually taking their time. They're not just throwing us into the action with these two characters. Kind of disappointing that they kind of did that at the beginning of this episode. It's like, okay, Bucky's angry, and let's just go on this journey with these two characters. We're picking up here. So I think, the introduction of them coming together could have been handled a bit differently. Maybe another scene beforehand or something. Not sure. So, yeah, Bucky, he's annoyed that Sam's given up the shield. But, Sam's protesting that he didn't know that the US government were going to give it to someone else. But what I did really like about this scene is that it then sort of moves into like this buddy cop comedy that the series was promising us. I really like how Sam starts chatting about how the Flag Smashers are not part of the big three: androids, aliens, and wizards. And then they have that really funny interaction about it. Oh, there's no such... Bucky's like, there's no such thing as wizards. He mentions, oh, what about Doctor Strange? He's like, he's a sorcerer. And he's like, well, a sorcerer is just a wizard without a hat. So I love the sort of buddy cop comedy between these two, because I really liked what they set up in Civil War, and I thought that was going to be the crux and the hinge of this show. The fact that we've got that and it plays out really well for my taste, I'm really pleased about. But did you enjoy the buddy cop relationship between these two?
Oh, absolutely. Like, especially someone who has been following the every press release, promotional interviews since even since Winter Soldier, and those two will always seem to have some great chemistry. So I'm glad that they were able to show that here. And yeah, to be fair, that interaction, I think that kind of saved the scene for me. Like, all the issues I had before, how they meet up and everything, they kind of just went away immediately once they started talking to each other and just being absolute idiots, which is great because this is the way you kind of build charisma and also some level of not relatability, but you definitely can see where they're coming from when it means to their own personalities. And also, we do need to say that this show was supposed to be out before WandaVision. So technically, what Bucky says is kind of true until we see WandaVision, and we do see that, witches and wizards are real. So yeah, which again, what is the difference between a witch and a sorcerer? Yeah, believe me, after so many years of D&D, I'm still not sure.
No one knows the real answer.
What big three?
The big three.
What big three?
Androids, aliens, and wizards.
That's not a thing.
That's definitely a thing.
No, it's not.
Every time we fight one of the three.
So who are you fighting now, Gandalf?
How do you know about Gandalf?
I read The Hobbit in 1937 when it first came out.
So you see my point?
No, I don't. There are no wizards.
Doctor Strange
Is a sorcerer.
A sorcerer is a wizard without a hat.
So yeah, Bucky then follows Sam to Munich, even though Sam doesn't want him there. On the plane ride to Germany, they start, again, more of this couple bickering that they've got. I love how Sam's just staring at him, and then Bucky just adjusts his position. He's like, oh, what? Are we doing a staring competition now? He calls him Buck. He doesn't like being called back Buck because, Steve called him that. Bucky says that Steve's known him longer. So there's this real tension here, but I can feel as if even though they're throwing jabs at each other, I do kind of feel that you can tell that they care about each other in one way or a sense because of Steve as their anchor. Sam then jumps out of a plane, which further annoys Bucky, who follows soon after. But his landing is far from gracious because he hasn't got a chute. And this is a really good way of utilizing his vibranium arm, which he uses as a sort of shield to crash down. So what did you, again, make of the more buddy cop interaction on the plane?
It's great because it kind of shows that they're not best friends yet, which makes sense because they would have been, because besides Civil War they don't have much other interaction. Although in Civil War they did show the same kind of energy, just being bigger to each other, but you can tell that at some level they admire the company. But yeah, like I said, the basis of the relationship is mostly because of Steve. And of course, because they both know Steve, they know that if they were friends to each other, then there's good reason for it. Yeah, I like the part with like the Bucky had a problem with the nickname, that it's something far more personal and intimate with Steve. Yeah, and also the fall, it's one of those things again, where I'm like, yeah, don't think about it. It's funny. Physics doesn't exist here. It's okay. There's a shield that works like a frisbee. Sure.
Yeah. You just got to buy into it, I guess.
To be fair, I did buy it because I liked the joke with Sam saying that he recorded all that on camera, which Once again, it's a good joke with really good chemistry between them.
Oh yeah, I mean the jokes keep on going because like as they go into the warehouse, tracking the flag smashers, we see the flag smashers, holding the heavy crates into the truck, further proving that these guys are super strong. Sam wants to wait and see where they go, but Bucky would rather barge in, and this is one of my favorite jokes in the whole episode. Sam says to Bucky, "Look at you all stealthily. Couple of days in Wakanda, and you White Panther."
Which that's okay. I did want to mention that in the previous episode, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to theorize again. I didn't want to go too hard on it, but it is kind of weird that 2 episodes in, and there were 2 references about Wakanda, and they were from Bucky, and I'm thinking because we did say like the whole show most likely will end with Sam fully embracing the Captain America role and still be the Falcon in some capacity. We saw before that Bucky, he kind of tries to move away from the Winter Soldier persona. So then and I'm wondering, is this going to be him fully embracing the White Wolf identity and possibly moving to Wakanda? Because, yeah, like you said, it was the only place he found peace. I mean, although I don't know, like it completely depends to what the plans are for Black Panther 2. But the thing is, especially to how this show goes, I could see Bucky in a way gets a new perspective on about Black lives in Western countries, and especially as we're gonna see later on with another character, and especially with Sam, I think he could get a new perspective, which could maybe inspire him to go back to Wakanda and kind of being almost not representative, but someone who could find a way of redemption by helping such communities in a way.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but that would actually be kind of interesting. You'd have to handle that very carefully, though, I think.
Exactly. But to be honest, if it is Ryan Coogler, Ryan Coogler is writing the next Black Panther film, and if there's any person, I would trust him. If that is the case.
Definitely. So let's get right into the thick of the action. So as the flag smashers pull out, Sam and Bucky fly/run after them. Bucky enters into the back of one of the vans. This was actually something I found really odd because there's 2 trucks, right? Why does he go to the first one so the person behind can see him getting in the back? That instantly caught out to me. I was like, why would you go to that one? Go to the one at the back. But maybe because, they gather that there's a hostage in that one. But anyway, they find out that the hostage is not a hostage. It is actually a flag smasher. This is Karli Morgenthau, played by Erin Kellyman. People will recognize her from Solo, a Star Wars story. And then this throws us into a fight on the Autobahn while the 2 trucks, drive parallel. Sam and Bucky are pummeled by the flag smashers. I think we get some really high intense action here, which is really cool. But then we get, the new Captain America and his friend Lamar show up and they add additional manpower. But again, they prove to be no match for these flag smashers. And then I was so sad, like Sam gets Red Wing killed. Karli just goes and destroys him. I was like, no, you've killed Red Wing. And then Bucky almost ends up being squashed by the tires. And, John Walker and Lamar are kicked off the truck like ants. Like, it's absolutely nothing. These flag smashers mean business. And I think all the characters in the show and everyone watching have come to the conclusion that these guys are definitely injected with the super serum. But what did you make of this big action sequence on the Autobahn?
Well, with the beginning, when you said about why Bucky go to that specific truck, I mean, Sam did say that they had a hostage, so which I like. I like the fact that once Bucky had heard that there's a hostage, he immediately ran with no second thought, which is a good attribute of him, although a bit too mindless because he didn't have much of a plan, which it kind of goes against to why he was angry with Sam before. But it is a good attribute, the fact that he was ready to risk his life to save an innocent. Although what I found very interesting is that the the truck behind it didn't seem to react at all when Bucky got in, which could mean two things. One, either they were anticipating this in some capacity, or two, they just had faith in Karli to just defeat him.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because when Karli punches him and he smashes into the other truck, there's two guys already on top and pull him up. So it seems like they were sort of expecting that to happen or something.
Yeah, like again, to be fair, like they are doing like an illegal thing, so to be being anticipating for any kind of involvement by anyone, it's a safe move. But yeah, like I said on the previous episode, I still have the fear that maybe everything is somehow connected, like there's a larger conspiracy, but still very early on, which is a bit annoying because like we said, we was on 6 episodes, and uh, but beyond that, it's interesting. Beyond that, yeah, Red Wing being destroyed. Uh, the thing is, I was ready to get sad, but then Bucky's reaction was funny,
Oh, yeah,
so
I've always wanted to do that.
but it's fine. I mean, Red Wing's gonna be back, like for sure. Like, I mean, how many times has he been destroyed in Civil War? Beyond the fight is really well choreographed. It's a bit shorter than I was hoping for, mainly because of how much was like very primary in all the promotional material. But beyond that, it was a good action sequence. And then when John Walker appears, which for one I was surprised. I didn't expect him to immediately have an action sequence with him. We could see him and Lamar having this really good cooperation, which that kind of shows the history between them and the military. Also, I liked how John threw the shield and then Bucky catched it like he did back in the Winter Soldier, which is some. Oh, I imagine he may have done this with Steve a couple of times, but yeah, and you definitely can see like Bucky's eyes, how angry he is at the moment. But yeah, it's a good sequence. It kind of says some stuff about each character in a way. I definitely like John Walker more because he gave away his shield to save his friend, which always a good attribute, even if you're possibly a villain. But the big takeaway that I took away from it is that John Walker is just the shield, especially when he goes against these kind of enemies. So I do have a feeling that he might. I don't know, but he, you know what kind of feeling he gives me? He gives me of Abomination in The Incredible Hulk. Like he kind of feels also like another military guy who is he's great at his job. He just wants to do what he was assigned for, but his own vanity and the terms of engagement of his job could push him to the next level and try to take the serum. Like even someone like Sam, he doesn't need the serum because he has his own wings. So even that is a bigger plus than touch the shield. And also the fact that John Walker used a gun, something that we haven't seen a Cap do since the Second World War, which, you know, it was a war. That made sense back then.
I was going to mention that because I think, he's shaping himself to be Captain America. And, he talks a bit later how he doesn't want to replace Steve Rogers. He just wants to be the best Captain America he can be. And I was at some point willing to buy into that. I'm like, okay, let's see what your intentions are. But then as soon as he pulled out the gun, now granted, I know American military, they're very, they like their weapons and stuff like that. But as soon as he pulled out the gun, I was like, you've automatically disqualified yourself as Captain America.
Yeah, like to be fair, even Cap during the war, even though he used guns, he didn't use them that much. Even then, if I remember right, the final fight with Red Skull's troops, he mostly used the shield and his own strength, not even actual pistols or anything like that.
Yeah.
Sorry about Red Wing.
No, you're not. What's going on in that big cyborg brain of yours?
It's computing.
You know what? I can actually see it. I can see the gears turning. Oh, they're malfunctioning. Shutting down. Yep, they're on fire.
We gotta figure out where the serum's coming from.
Yeah, and how in the hell, after 80 years, are there 8 super soldiers running loose?
After the battle, both John and Lamar meet up with Sam and Bucky, and they ask him, come back, let's take a ride with us back to the airport. It's 20 miles out, but they're not having it. Eventually, they climb on, and they talk about how the GRC has been helping them put things back together. Lamar reveals that he's part of something called Battlestar, which I was, completely went over my head. After the show ended, I did a bit of research. I found out that is a connection to the comics and stuff like that. This all annoys Bucky. He gets pissed off and he's like, stop the vehicle, I'm out of here. But then as the vehicle stops, as I said, John Walker's saying to Sam that he doesn't want to be Steve or replace Steve. He's just trying to be the best Cap he can be. And it'd be great if he could have been Cap's wingman, Sam and Bucky on his side, but it just doesn't sit well with Falcon and all, who also gets off. So, like I said at top, I think this episode does try its best to make us like John Walker a little bit, at least. Like, he isn't injected with the super soldier serum, so there's a vulnerability to him, but he is very physically talented and purposeful for the things he wants to do. He does want to make things work. He's trying to play nice with our heroes, but, and others vouch for him in a way that makes him seem deserving of the mantle. But at the same time, he's a bit of a dingus. He is trying, but Bucky and Sam are too disgruntled with each other to give the situation and him a chance, if you know what I mean. So at best, I think John Walker's maybe a bit naive, but I also think there's a lot of arrogance with him following a couple of scenes later when we see him, talk to them and he's like, stay out of my way sort of thing. So he's a very interesting character, I think, John Walker, in this, because we don't really know his intentions or motivations yet. So from one end, he seems like he wants to do the right thing, but I'm also inclined to maybe think, like you, Stefanos, that he's maybe involved or part of a more sinister plot.
Yeah, but like I did like this conversation between the four of them. Kind of brought me a lot of feelings of Civil War in a way, like early on, where you would have a team of soldiers, warriors, or in a way heroes, but there is obviously a divide between them, mostly as ideological divide. The thing is, with John Walker, whenever he's always saying the right things, which kind of brings me back to his interview. And in that interview, basically he sounded like a politician. He sounded the kind of person who tries his best to bring in the populace, to be that likable person in the media. And he kind of seemed to be doing the same thing here. And yes, in the end, he did sound far more genuine when he was saying he's trying to be the best Cap he can be. But like Sam says, it was always the final line where he says he just wins Steve's wingman, which again, it kind of really shows what he thinks of Sam and Bucky. And the thing is, they weren't Steve's wingman. No, they were friends. They were allies. The Avengers didn't. Even though the Avengers did have a leader either in Steve or Tony, at the end of the day, it was a team. There was no hierarchy in all this. So, yeah, it did sound very much like a recruitment, more like a political recruitment than an actual military one. So, and also, it is interesting the information they gave about the GRC, the fact that because of so many people coming back, they had to push away a lot of immigrants from other countries during the blip, which it kind of makes sense for the Flag Smashers to what they stand for.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the Flag Smashers, because like the next scene, they arrive in this sort of safe house where they're greeted by some German guy, who's saying he's a big supporter of them, calls them Robin Hood for what they're doing and stuff like that. Inside, Karli Morgenthau notes to her fellow flag smashers that the GRC is useless because it has put people who were in power before the blip back into those seats, and that it shows that they care more about those who returned than that those who suffered throughout the 5 years. So this really creates an interesting dynamic for the flag smashers, because up until now we've been shown that they believe in a world without borders. You know, that action sequence we saw, the whole purpose of that, they were stealing vaccines to help people who need medical attention. Do you know what I mean? And from all that, the speeches that Karli's giving and stuff, I'm a bit like, you know, I can totally see why a bunch of people would believe in this sort of belief and cause. And in a way, it's extremely relevant to what we're going through in our real life. You know, during that first lockdown due to the pandemic, you know, a lot of the world started to clear up in terms of pollution and animal life and stuff like that. And everybody was super into that. You know, everyone was like, oh my God, look what difference we can make. And then as soon as, you know, the businesses can start to carry on again, everyone's like, oh, here we go again. And it's back to the way it was. So I'm kind of on the flag smasher side in one sense. I still don't know their evil intentions, but so far it seems there's a lot of good in them. Like the German guy says, there's an element of Robin Hood about them.
Yeah, like it's definitely something which I can see the appeal, and in a way I kind of agree with them in this kind of circumstances. And I could see a reason why Sam didn't want to much reveal all this information about them to the governments, as we do see overall there is this distrust in the American government by Sam. And yeah, something like he said on the first episode, that when something that is good for bad for some people is good for others. And even though, yes, the blip was a huge catastrophic event, a lot of people had to mourn. But yeah, but these few people managed to gain something. The same thing happens when everyone who was gone came back. Even though it was great for all the families to be reunited and everything, for other people, it actually went back to worse. It's definitely something interesting. I wish we had more of that, or at least we get to know Karli more and the group overall. And like I said, still very early on. I hope we get more into it in the next couple of episodes, because it's definitely interesting, but I also want to know the plan to what it is, and thus I'm gonna have an opinion about them. But so far, they seem far more as anti-heroes than actual villains.
You know, and it also shows it's reflective of a lot of current modern day politics and real life politics, where some people perceive things like vigilantes or anti-heroes as doing the right thing, when our governments and our sort of establishments deem people as terrorists or violent people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course, it really depends to what kind of like political side you are at. But yes, but there is this element of political agenda in a way, that you don't see things as they are, but you see it as the way you want them to be. And I like the parallels, like you said before, that it very much is like the pandemic. I mean, they even stealing vaccines.
Oh yeah.
Which is
that was a bit close to home, that one.
yeah. Which we all know that there is actually not a black market for all that stuff. Although it's kind of the reverse, because in the black market is actually the rich people who buy all this stuff. But in this case, they actually give them to the poor, which is, it's obviously a very admirable thing. And based on the previous episode, also we see that some nations, they are broken, that do not have the good relations that they once had. So they're definitely very interesting elements. I still don't, but again, like I said, I need more time and I need more context to have a final opinion.
Yeah, I'm the same with you. I'm like, so far everything looks happy and great, but what are your actual intentions? What's your bigger plan? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and also Also, that brings more questions, like because now we know who is coming later on. I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to think. How is all this connected? Like, I don't understand yet where we're heading.
Like, if you had told me that they were Baron Zemo's coming back, but it was just going to be like as it was set up in this episode, that they're just going to have a conversation with him in jail or something like that. But what we've seen in the trailers is that Baron Zemo is out of jail doing shit. So how is he connected to the bigger picture?
Yeah, like I said, like I could maybe see them being like puppets to a greater organization or something like that, or like the real master is either Zemo or someone else. Again, I am not certain because it's not like in WandaVision, which you knew that there was something wrong in all this, and that definitely someone is doing something. In this case, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Karli, we can't stay here for long.
6 months ago, would you have imagined people supporting the cause like this?
We're not playing no more. We can't let the same arseholes who were put back in power after the blip win. The GRC care more about the people who came back than the ones who never left. We got a glimpse of how things could be. I need to know that you're all committed. Because after tomorrow, there's no going back.
The episode then takes us back to America, to Baltimore, Maryland, with Bucky telling Sam that he should see someone. This part in the episode, this is actually probably my favorite stuff now. We get introduced to a new character called Isaiah Bradley, played by Carl Lumbly, a Korean war veteran who Bucky met in 1951 when he was the Winter Soldier. And it's revealed that Isaiah was among the test subjects in the US government used to recreate the super soldier serum, and one of the few who was feared by Hydra like Steve. But Isaiah, reveals that instead of being honored as a hero, he was jailed for 30 years. This hits incredibly, not so much here in the UK, but especially what's going on in America at the minute. I must hit so close to home for them, because I'm just like, oh my God, you're hitting the nail on the head here. It just goes to show it's elaborating more on what was set up in episode 1 with the bank scene, that no matter who you are, how much wealth you have, if you're a hero or not, there's still a big race issue in America. Here's this guy who is literally an actual hero for America, volunteered to take the serum, did all sorts of things for the US government, and then was jailed for 30 years. And, Carl Lumbly's performance in this as well, like, I was intimidated by him. Like, he looked distraught and did not want to see Bucky at all. But I do like the little line he says, well, I kicked your ass back then. But what did you make of the introduction of Isaiah Bradley?
Now, that also for me, it's like my favorite thing in the episode. And probably like so far in the show, mainly because I did not expect this. I had no idea. I did see rumors that this character could make an appearance, but I didn't expect it to be on this specific issue. And unfortunately, this is very true. If you look at of the very terrible history of America, you will find a lot testimonies of African Americans being tested, imprisoned, and also tortured for the reasons of science. Actually, a lot of the modern vaccines and diseases that have been cured now were because of these illegal, inhumane experimentations. And yeah, and unfortunately, the 30 years and the testing is something very true to the American government, which ever since I've been trying to be completely silent about it. And I love also how it kind of goes back to a few moments before when Sam was talking to these kids, and the kid was calling him Black Falcon, and he was saying, "Oh, why? It's because I'm black and I'm Falcon," which also feels like a critique on the character in the comics, because the comics he's not called Captain America, he's called Black Captain America, even though he has the same strength, he had a different shield. But at that time, besides that small difference, he should have been just Cap. And it's very good, it's very effective, and especially how important it is to Sam, the fact that, if that was known, well, most likely we would have had more black superheroes, which also kind of feels also critic to the MCU, because also the MCU did a very long time to have black heroes, specifically solo films of black heroes. But it was effective, and especially to the scene that comes after, which kind of reveals the original scene of America and of Marvel itself.
Yeah, definitely. It's incredibly powerful, because then after that, like you said, Asaya tells Bucky and Sam to leave, and they have this conversation outside. Sam's really angry that obviously he kept this from him. Bucky says that he's the only one who knew it. He didn't even tell Steve. And then as the argument continues, the police show up, and they ask Sam, not Bucky, to calm down while treating Bucky as a possible victim. And unfortunately, this is another look into the casual, everyday racism that African Americans have to face. It's only when one of them realizes that it's Falcon do they sort of step down. And funnily enough, after that, they check in with their precinct and they end up arresting Bucky instead because he missed his court-mandated therapy session. But what did you think of this scene with the police?
Right, so as the previous scene was my favorite scene of the show so far, that's my second favorite scene of the show so far. Because, for one, the directing was very clever to do the center blocking, or when it goes to Sam and right behind him, you can see the police car just arriving to the streets. So that means they were paying attention to the conflict. And yeah, the whole conversation, which again, I did not expect from a Marvel property to go there. Because out of all the things that we say, physics doesn't matter and all this is actually way too real. This is the kind of story a lot of famous black artists and celebrities have been saying. Like, this is the kind of stories they've been saying over and over again. Like, when the police come, they ask for ID, but once they figure out who they actually are, they're being all apologetic and big fans, even though that shouldn't be the case, because so there was no basis in any of this. But it's also very interesting that Sam the way he was acting to Bucky, as Bucky was saying, just showing him your idea, he was being very defensive, almost felt offended by Bucky to say that. But it is interesting where the things gets reversed when Bucky's the one who gets arrested, and then Sam almost seeing a different perspective. Like which is something because me as an Asian person, I kind of do the same thing when I kind of have a white friend, and sometimes I react to what they say or do because they're white. But I never really think that that this is just a person, because then I kind of do the same mistake as other people do to me. And in the end, I can see Sam having that problem in the moments. He kind of realizes, Bucky obviously is dealing with his own shit, and hearing about all of this, he missed probation and stuff, is almost being reversed. Although we do need to say that they're being way too nice to Bucky than they would have been with Sam.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but if that was Sam in that situation getting arrested, there would have been maybe a bit more struggle. There would have been maybe a bit more violence involved, unnecessary violence anyway. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is the real truth of what's going on in a lot of countries, obviously, but primarily in America at the minute.
You know what they did to me for being a hero? They put my ass in jail for 30 years. People running tests, taking my blood, coming into my cell. Even your people weren't done with me.
I say it.
Get out of my house!
Let's go, man. Let's go.
We then move to the police station, where Bucky's therapist, Dr. Rayna, shows up. Sam is grateful that she helped, that she got him out, but she points out it wasn't me, it's actually him. And then we see John Walker, the new Cap, who's looking all arrogant and douchey, and he's like, hey, wait for me outside. And he says Bucky's too valuable an asset to be kept locked up. He's going to work with me. Very, very arrogant here. I think this is the point where we start to see a different version of John Walker. So, because he says that, oh, we needed him, and I'm the government after all. Do you know what I mean? He does that sort of thing with his hands and stuff. But before Sam and Bucky can leave, Dr. Rayna pulls them into a therapy session as a condition of the release. But as you can expect, it doesn't go well. Bucky reiterates that Sam shouldn't have given up the shield because Steve trusted him with it. But what I really like here is that Sam says that both you and Steve need to accept the fact that he did what he thought was right. And I thought that was really, really powerful. But did you like the sort of new therapy session with both of them too? I especially liked the more of the banter in this when they were like getting close to each other. He's like, oh, should I put my leg here? Okay. Oh, you like that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought all of that was played out fantastically. But what did you think?
Oh, like specifically that thing. It's the kind of shit that all the fanfic people would love. Like I can already see a lot of fan art and all the shippers going crazy with this. Which I'm not gonna lie, they're like I said, great chemistry. The charisma between them, it's palpable, and also to some degree sometimes flirtatious. But it's great. It's great entertainment. But the conversation and the therapy itself, even though it does start kind of cynical for both sides, it kind of ends up being an actual conversation. Even though it ends on a bitter note, it still is actually very therapeutic for both of them. And and I like the fact that, like I said before, the only reason he even got out of the house and talked to Sam is because he was angry. And even though initially he seemed angry at Sam, it was actually far more angry at himself, because when he says the line, if he was wrong about you, he was wrong about me, which it's a great line, because it shows that how far his inner demons go. Because for one, he shouldn't be projecting his own self to Sam, or to anyone else, to be honest. But it kind of shows how much his sins have affected him to the degree that he can't even trust Sam's judgment, which he should, as he has proven to be a great ally and a great hero himself. And what Sam says, it's true. Like if he needs to believe that he did what he thought was right, even if it wasn't right, he did it with good intention.
So I was just going to say, I also think that line that Sam says, I do think there's an element of a racial aspect involved in that as well.
Yeah, because he says the thing that like you and Steve could not understand, which is true. And to be fair, that does go back to the first scene, which I don't remember if it was the first scene where he says that you with your long life don't tell me about my rights, which is true. Because to be fair, we do need to accept the fact that not only both Steve and Bucky are white, but also they lived in the 30s and 40s, which at that time they obviously had far better life and more rights than people like Sam, and also Isaiah. Obviously, that's another now that we have an actual parallel to that time, and it makes sense. And in Sam's perspective, it does make sense, but obviously, it really depends to, I think, very much to how he was raised, and specifically being in Louisiana, which is a very conservative state, which obviously had more, and also the fact that both Steve and Bucky, they were raised in New York, a far more liberal and progressive area in America, even back in the 40s, compared to the rest of the country. So yes, there's a lot of it. There's a lot about race, nurture, and nature, which it does make Sam, for one, make him far more complex than everyone else thinks. Which I think kind of brings also judgment upon us because we all thought he would immediately take the mantle, but we thought of it just as Falcon, but never really as Sam. And yeah, and I think that really brings a big contrast with John Walker because John Walker says he tries to do the best he can be, but not necessarily the best that the Shield needs.
Definitely. Some really interesting themes and thematic stuff here. And you know, we said this in the first episode, but I just really like that Disney Plus has given us this outlets, you know, to spend time with these characters, because we wouldn't have got these stories had they been movies, you know what I mean? And I don't even think they probably would have gone and said, hey, let's make a Falcon and Winter Soldier movies. But the fact that they've got this series gives them the opportunity to tell these really interesting stories, and it just makes the characters so much better, and you feel so much more for them, more than just whiz-bang power superheroes we see on screen as actual humans dealing with real human issues. So as they step out then, Sam and Bucky are continuing to have a conversation about the Flag Smashers. Then they meet up with John Walker and Lamar. They share some basic intel, but then as you soon see, friction starts to develop. Sam and Bucky can't stand the fact that a stranger has walked into a position that belonged to their former best friend. John Walker says they have a shared goal, but Sam points out that they are much more flexible as they are free agents. And as they part ways, Walker tells them to stay the hell out of his way. So, as I said, now we're seeing a different side to John Walker, a more arrogant, a more, I don't want to go as far to say sinister, but maybe a bit more evil intentions from him. But what did you make of that sort of little interaction?
It really reminded me of Civil War because it feels almost exactly the same conflict. The whole thing with Sokovia Accords being that the Avengers should be active in the control of the UN, and the fact that Sam says that John Walker has rules of engagement. He has restrictions he has to follow and to answer to the government. They don't have that. And that was very similar to the conflict between Tony and Steve. That Tony was all up for the control and Steve was all up for the freedom of doing what you think is right than being controlled by a state that might change the mind of what is moral or not. Which, it's great. It's a great comeback to that. Because besides that, the fact that I always felt that it was weird that we only dealt with that kind of issue in only one film and not throughout Phase 3. So I'm glad we're back to that. But also, I do feel there's a bit of more arrogance from John Walker, but a bit arrogance also from Sam and Bucky, because in there, I think their feelings far more cloud their senses. Because in one way, it would make sense you want to have Captain America's help and assistance, because that will make it more official in a way. But I do understand that the flexibility is something that they need right now, especially when you're dealing with a potential terrorist group. And you don't need to follow sanctions to, just do the basics of going to another country.
Take it easy. Look, Walker's right. It is imperative that we find them and stop them. But you guys have rules of engagement and all kind of authorizations you have to get. We're free agents. We're more flexible. So it wouldn't make sense for us to work with you.
A word of advice, then. Stay the hell out of my way.
So then we cut back to the Flag Smashers, who are constantly on the run, as they're constantly being tracked. They're loading these vaccines, which, are they vaccines though, or could be super soldier serum? Who knows yet? Into this plane where the Power Brokers men are showing up. And one of the Flag Smashers volunteers to sacrifice himself to buy time for Karli and the gang to make their getaway. And he does exactly that by charging into the armed agents as they fire onto him. I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think these are vaccines, or do you think it's a super soldier serum?
I think it really depends to what they stole from the broker. Because I think the intentions, the way they're presenting it is the fact that these vaccines belong to him. But I think it could be also the bank in Switzerland. It could be also that, because again, if you're a broker, that usually would mean money, and I could see being that. But again, to be fair, because of how important it was to take those vaccines out, it could be super soldier serums. I can see it either way, to be honest. But again, I don't know much about it because they don't haven't given it much information. But I do need to say like a small critique. Like I love the fact that one of the members was willing to stay behind to sacrifice himself to save the rest of the group, which again it shows that they're not, or possibly they're not the bad guys in all this. But again, you already push the pole down. That already delayed them for a bit. You don't have to charge them. Just stay there and keep guards. You don't need you don't need to run to save time because you're already saving time. But 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 making yourself run in front of it right after you push the pole and die, you don't really save time. You wasted exactly the same amount of time as you did before. I'm just like I don't know. It was one of the things that's you prove your point, and then maybe you're doing for maybe doing for the time that we have because we're already like on 40-minute mark. But yeah, I was thinking. I mean, to be fair, maybe we should think also maybe they're not soldiers. Maybe they're just normal people that just ended up with these powers, which I could see being a point.
I can see that more likely than soldiers, to be honest.
Yeah, because even the way they were fighting on the trucks, they didn't really seem they seemed coordinated, but they didn't seem necessarily practical. The biggest assets were the powers than the actual tactics.
Yeah, I was going to say they tended to rely on the brute strength of their abilities more than anything else. While, with people like Bucky or even Steve Rogers, there's more inventive ways of using their strength, but they're just going for it like a brawler, in a way. So we then end the episode going back to Baltimore, where Sam and Bucky are trying to plan out what they'll do next. They've realized that John Walker doesn't have any leads from the chat they had, but Bucky notes that if you want to know about super soldiers, then Hydra is your best bet. And given Sam's size, because he knows what's about to happen, they have to go see Baron Zemo. So yeah, there he is, obviously played by the same actor, Daniel Brühl. Baron Zemo is finally coming into the mix. Are you excited to see this guy? And I'm excited, but I'm like we were discussing earlier. I'm just like, how is he going to fit into all of this? Because granted, it makes sense for Sam and Bucky to go visit him if they want information on super soldiers and stuff like that and Hydra, and he knows all the information because he had the book and stuff. But if he breaks out, what is his bigger goals? How is he going to play into this bigger story?
Yeah, for starters, Zemo is generally one of my favorite villains from the MCU, mainly because the fact that he's not necessarily a typical villain. He's just a person. Just a person with a mind and a skill set that he just has a certain agenda, which is not completely maniacal. Still psychotic, mainly because he used psychotic ways, but also in somewhat relatable. And I always liked him. But again, like we said before, and like you said, I have no idea how he fits in all this. Maybe he's been working behind the shadows all the time through his shell. Again, it won't be that crazy because we've seen this kind of trope before. But the problem is, it is a trope. So I'm still not certain where it fits. But talking about tropes, one thing that I found very interesting, but also cliche, is the use of Mozart's Requiem when they mention Zemo, which
Oh, yeah.
for some reason now it's become the theme of superhero villains,
It has, hasn't it?
which I don't understand. And
I think it was also used in Watchmen, wasn't it?
yeah, for Ozymandias every time, like so many times for him, which is good. It's a banger. Don't get me wrong. That's why it's a classic.
Fire.
Yeah, but then again, I'm like, why has this become the theme? But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. To be honest, I'm kind of sad we only got these two shots from him. I kind of wish we had more of him, or even have more of Saren also. But it's fine. We got a reference. We know this is Enemy of the States, which that kind of like brings a setup to when we meet her later on. But yeah, I think I'm more looking forward to next week, mainly because of Zemo. But I do have a feeling that Sam and Bucky will fuck it up somehow, and he's gonna escape.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past Zemo to have some sort of plan up his sleeve. And I also think we might get, because her name was dropped in this episode, we might get Agent 13 in the next episode as well.
Yeah, hopefully. Because again, I thought we would already have her, but
Yeah, because she still has a part to play in this, and I'm just like, it just seems, I mean, I'm willing, obviously, I want to see how the whole series plays out, but it just seems like there's a lot of moving pieces, and I'm just like, there's only 4 episodes, what's going on? Like,
yeah. Also, because after I watched the episode and after the final scene, I was thinking, wait, but wouldn't you have a problem meeting Zemo and because he could say it says those 6 words and it has your control? But then I remember they're like, oh no, wait, you went to Wakanda. They actually helped you with that.
yes, but I still think there's a little bit in Bucky still. I think Zemo could still manipulate Bucky, I think.
I mean, I could say wave manipulation, but not necessarily in that way. I think you could be far more emotional manipulation. But again, if Bucky mentions Wakanda again on the next episode, I want to talk to Ryan Coogler and be like, dude, is he gonna be in it?
Is he gonna be the White Wolf?
Yeah, because to be honest, because I know there's a lot of rumors about Black Panther that Shuri will be getting the mantle. Like I could see Bucky being in there, being like almost like a secondary mentor or something. But again, I'm not theorizing. I'm not saying anything else. I'm just putting it out there because if it happens, you come back to me and be like, oh my god, you were right.
Exactly. We're just along for the ride. No theorizing here. Just putting it out there. Could happen. So yeah, that's obviously the end of the episode. As we said, we're excited to see where it goes next week, primarily for Zemo. This episode overall, again, I did think it was a strong episode. Probably didn't like it as much as the premiere episode. I just think there's a couple of little things that bothered me with sort of Bucky's introduction to Falcon and stuff like that. But I did think overall, it's, like I said, it hinges on the buddy cop aspect of Bucky and Sam, which I think is really strong. And, if that's going to be the crux of this whole series, then I'm all for it. Some really good banter. Again, some really good action, really good use of Red Wing, but extremely sad and tragic to see the demise of Red Wing. That got to me. I do like the introduction, a proper introduction of Karli Morgenthau, played by Erin Kellyman. I do really like her as an actress. I think she's great. And yeah, again, some just really deep thematic stuff, some real world issues that they're tackling, which I sort of applaud them for, that they're going for in this show. So yeah, overall, I'm a big fan of this episode. Couple of little things that don't sit well with me, but I'm looking forward to see where this show goes. How about you, Stefanos? Any final thoughts on this episode?
A couple of things, more or less the same with you, but I do have to say that I've really felt the omission of the secondary characters that we were introduced on the previous episode. Like, I really wanted to see more of Sam and his sister, especially Bucky and Yuri and everything that's with his son. Because there were very interesting aspects of these people. I I was expecting to see more of them. I mean, I'm pretty sure we will, but I kind of hoped they would be part of the arcs a bit more. Beyond that, I did like the episode, like I said, and also obviously I'm really looking forward for next week. I hope from next week they're gonna start being more out there, like starting really revealing some stuff or some elements to the overall story and plots, so we can have not necessarily an idea, but a level of anticipation, like we are part of this mystery of this action thriller. Because so far, we are too much in the dark, and we're not presented too many breadcrumbs to follow. So I really want them to be more give a bigger priority to the plots, because so far the characters are great. I really like them, but please show us more to what the story is.
I agree. It feels, like I said up top, this episode feels very much a setup episode of introducing more characters and stuff like that and different themes, but not progressing the story necessarily. And I agree with you. I think by next episode, you really need to get the story going, because that's your halfway mark now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and if we see this being almost like a film, the next episode should be the beginning of the second act.
Yes, definitely. All right, then. So thank everyone for listening and coming, to this review episode. We always appreciate people coming on board every week and listening to us speculating, theorizing, and geeking out about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But before we get out of here, Stefanos, where would the people be able to find you and see what you got coming up?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SY Florakis. And also, you can also find me in my letterboxd in there too, if you want to see my daily and weekly reviews or comments on each film I watch. And for any written work, you can find me on Fresh Take, or you will find an article there about my Oscar predictions, and also some of the reviews and predictions I did for WandaVision, which unfortunately a lot of the theories I did back then are not valid anymore, but they're still fun.
Don't feel too bad, because I think everybody was in the same position as you. Yeah, likewise, you can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at Sweaty Jake, and on Letterboxd at Jake Hart. That's Hart. And you can find Capes, Cows and Masks on Twitter and Facebook at Capes, Cows and Masks. And if you're enjoying our reviews and listening to us on Anchor, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, whatever you listen to us, definitely leave us some reviews, leave us some stars. It all helps us go up in the rankings. And the best thing you can do, share this podcast amongst all your friends. Tell all your friends that this is the Falcon and Winter Soldier review show to be listening to. So we'll see you all next week where we continue the story. Once again, thanks for listening. Stay safe, everyone, and take care now. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.